It's that time of the year where I dive into all the new updates for the most exciting upcoming MMOs. We've got some massive new MMOs to add to the list this time, and we've got some big updates to the ones that were already on it. So this should be an exciting video. Let's dive in. First up, we've got EVERQUEST 3, but before we begin, there's some MMOs on this list that don't have any footage to show yet because they're in their very early stages. So when that happens, I'll try to show the most relevant MMO footage possible, but I won't always have footage to show of that MMO. With that out of the way, if EVERQUEST 3 is anything like the previous entries, it's going to be available on PC and console. EVERQUEST was announced at PAX East this year, and sadly we don't know a whole lot about this one yet because it was just announced. They've described it as being in its ideation phase, so pre-development. But they did confirm that they are working on it and that they are hiring for its development. EVERQUEST was the MMO to play back before WoW was released. After that, WoW took over and EVERQUEST's attempts to steal the spotlight back were unsuccessful. EVERQUEST 2 and EVERQUEST Next fell somewhat flat in comparison. So flat that to this day, the original EVERQUEST, with its small but loyal population, still has more players than the other two combined. EVERQUEST 3 is going to be one more chance for a successful AAA MMO, and as you'll see, we have quite a few of those on this list. And for once, only a few of the MMOs on this list look like they will be ruined by monetization. That's great news. Next up, we have Horizon Online, a Sony MMO that's being made by NCSoft, which means that it's likely going to come to PC and PlayStation at the very least. Sony and NCSoft have seemingly teamed up to make an MMORPG for the Horizon franchise. This is a fascinating concept to think about. Sony is responsible for titles like God of War and Horizon, games with amazing storytelling, while NCSoft has definitely got a lot of experience making MMOs, like Lineage 2 and Throne and Liberty. Right now, this project is internally being referred to as Project H. NCSoft stated that they have an internal development team working on the title. In 2023, they had well over 100 people working on it, which means they are well underway in their development. Meanwhile, we've seen job postings from ArenaNet about working on an Unreal Engine 5 powered online fantasy RPG. Is ArenaNet working on Horizon Online, or are they working on something else? All we know right now is negotiations have concluded and development has begun, so it sounds like this is actually happening. You have to imagine that since this is an important franchise for Sony, Sony would keep the monetization of the MMO, let's say, purer than NCSoft titles typically have become known for over the years, which means we could see a title that has NCSoft quality, Sony lore, and Sony monetization. This could be a good combination. The Horizon franchise has been heralded as one of the best out there, and its world really does lend itself to an MMO type of setting. Seeing as they had over 100 people working on this in 2023, we can expect this game to be out within the next 5 or 6 years. And I've got to be honest, I didn't see this MMO or this partnership coming, but in a lot of ways, I think it makes perfect sense and I'm excited to follow it. Do you ever find yourself craving a massive, beautiful, open world game to explore? Then the sponsor of today's video is perfect for you. The Epic Games Store, which has over 2,900 titles for you to pick from, like Genshin Impact, a massive open world action RPG available on multiple platforms. Play it on your PC at home and on your phone when you're on the go. Step into a vast magical world now and start your adventure on the continent of Teyvat, where 7 kinds of elemental power surge. If you like being rewarded for exploring all corners of a massive, beautiful world, Genshin Impact is for you. Genshin Impact's new 5.0 update adds new characters, one of which is Kinich, a representative of the Scions of the Canopy. He can swing in midair using a grappling hook, or he can use it as a weapon against his enemies. The other is Milani, a Hydro character who bends water to her will to devastate her enemies. 5.0 is also bringing massive rewards, like free 5-star characters and free polls. Also, new and returning players can join in on all of the newest content. All they have to do is start the Archon quest of Natlan after completing Liu's Archon quest. So what are you waiting for? It's completely free to dive into this massive, beautiful open world and unravel its mysteries. Download Genshin Impact now on the Epic Games Store using the link in the description and use code EPICGENSHIN2024 for free items and earn 5% Epic rewards on purchases. Also, Epic Games Store has a new game you can download for free and keep forever every Thursday. So don't miss out. Open your Epic Games launcher every Thursday to see which free game you can grab. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the video. Next up, a WARHAMMER MMO. This one is all the more exciting with the recent success of Space Marine 2. I think now, more than ever, there is an appetite for a WARHAMMER MMO. This is being made by a brand new studio called Jackalopetic Games, headed by Emmerich, who's known for his work on games like Neverwinter. Emmerich says he's excited to be working with Games Workshop to bring the deep lore of the IP to the massively multiplayer experience. They plan to build the game in Unreal Engine 5, and he wants combat to be fluid, so it's sounding like it's going to be more like an action game than a tab target game. As for monetization, it hasn't been firmly announced yet, but he did mention that he feels like he's leaning away from free-to-play. I think the most noteworthy thing that he said about the Warhammer MMO so far was that he thought the mistake other developers in the West made was that they focused too hard on trying to beat WoW at its own game, which means they would have to be as successful or more successful than WoW to put out as much content and as high of quality content to be able to compete with WoW at its own game. So instead, he plans for this new Warhammer MMO to carve its own path to avoid that problem. This is one of a few MMOs on the list today that are really making it their mission statement to be a new type of MMO, to deliver a new experience that you're not already getting with WoW in particular. He also says that they are not ready to announce whether it's going to be a fantasy Warhammer game or a 40k Warhammer game, but that they do internally know the answer to that question. Perhaps the most controversial thing that he said was that PvP is not and will not be a focus for this MMO. Personally, I'm fine with that. I get my PvP fix in other games. I don't tend to spend a lot of time PvPing in MMOs these days. Although that could be a chicken and egg thing. Am I not PvPing because current MMOs aren't offering a great PvP experience, or am I just no longer interested in that PvP experience? Either way, I'll be keeping my ear to the ground on this one, and I'll be sure to let you guys know as soon as there's major updates. Next up, we have ARCHEAGE 2. This is one of the upcoming MMOs with the highest chance to do something special, but also perhaps the highest chance to smother that special game to death with over-monetization. ARCHEAGE 2 is coming to PC and console and was recently delayed past 2025. We found out that ARCHEAGE 2 is going to be a radical departure from its predecessor's large-scale PvP between factions, instead focusing on single-player content and guild versus guild content. Now, the coolest thing about ARCHEAGE 2 is that it has some features we don't really see in other MMOs right now, such as sea warfare, which, if done right, could be a ton of fun. You may have noticed by the graphics, this is going to be another MMO built on Unreal Engine 5. ARCHEAGE 2 has plans to allow players to build entire towns and customize them. So far, we know the game will feature humans and elves, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other races make it into the game. According to the developer, the game is going to feature a seamless open world, and if you've been following the progress of Ashes of Creation, you'll hear some familiar features in ARCHEAGE 2, as Ashes of Creation has drawn significant inspiration from ARCHEAGE 1. The developers plan for ARCHEAGE 2 to have action-packed combat, and so far what I've seen reminds me a lot of BDO. They also said it's very important for the game to have AAA visuals that take advantage of the Unreal Engine 5's capabilities, and based on this early footage, it looks like they're succeeding on that front. They are putting a lot of time and money into telling an immersive and compelling storyline this time, and are aiming to have a less linear progression and focus on a more personal story and journey than they did in ARCHEAGE 1. The story of the game will portray Aurora when it was first discovered and people were first settling in the area. The story will involve discovering and solving the mysteries of an ancient civilization that had been forgotten for thousands of years, leaving it to blend with the natural environment. Like I said last time, this civilization kind of reminds me of the Dwemer from Elder Scrolls franchise. The developer went on to acknowledge that ARCHEAGE 1 had trade runs that were enjoyable but had many flaws, so in ARCHEAGE 2 they plan to bring back that system and greatly enhance it. Players will be allowed to participate in these both alone or in teams. And that's because this is where Ashes got the idea from. They also pointed out that housing was a popular feature of the original title, so this time they'll be improving that and adding more customization, as well as allowing players to live in towns with their friends and even create their own towns with their guild members. Now that sounds like a really interesting feature, and I'm really curious to see how that plays out in-game. Will these towns be instanced, or will other players be able to see them when they're not involved in those towns? This game was supposed to have a closed beta in early 2024, but all of that's been delayed, and so has the release date. So unfortunately, this one won't be releasing until after 2025 as of right now. Next up, we have Lord of the Rings MMO by Amazon Game Studios. This one's coming to PC and maybe console, we're not sure yet. While it's very early in development for this one, especially since the last Lord of the Rings MMO fell through when they couldn't come to an agreement with a Chinese publisher, this Lord of the Rings MMO will be developed by Amazon Games in the United States. They say it plans to be authentic to the source material, but it is being made by Amazon Games, who are owned by Amazon, who haven't been exactly faithful to Lord of the Rings in the Rings of Power TV show. So fingers crossed, I guess. This MMO will be made by the same dev team that made New World. About a year ago, when I last made a video about this, I was worried that this would impact New World's content release schedule, and with the power of hindsight, it looks like I might have been right, with the #1 complaint from the New World player base being lack of endgame content over the last year. But the question is, would I be willing to trade speed on New World's updates for speed on a Lord of the Rings MMO? Yes, I would. It sounds like they plan to make the world massive and seamless, just like New World or WoW, and this is great news for me. I am also bored of MMOs that call themselves open world, but just end up with everyone standing in town queuing up for content as though they are sitting in a multiplayer lobby game. And that's not a dig against any one MMO, that pretty much describes every MMO out right now. And yes, they will be using the same Azoth engine that New World uses, but do plan to evolve the engine considerably so that it will not feel like New World. This is honestly fine with me. I thought the New World engine did a lot of things really well. Climbing, mantling, gathering, zone design, and scale, all without a single load screen as you run from one end of the game to the other. There are a lot of positives to be had with the New World engine. Last time I made this vid, I said I hoped we'd see swimming added to New World so that the Lord of the Rings MMO could take advantage of it, and I'm happy to report that swimming was added to New World in its latest update. You can now swim, the engine can handle it. So there's hope for the Lord of the Rings MMO yet. If they have a clear vision for the story and the questing and the dungeons and the raids from the very beginning of this MMO, and they spend the entire development cycle working towards that end, I think this game is going to be a home run. A massive open world MMO in a seamless world without load screens and heaps of Lord of the Rings lore. It's just going to be really hard to fail here. Unfortunately, this is very early in development, but there is a silver lining. Because it's an experienced team and they are reusing the Azoth engine, its development timeline should be significantly reduced compared to your average MMO timeline. Still, an optimistic timeline here would be to see a playable beta in 4 years. So thank God for the other MMOs on this list in the meantime. Speaking of NCSoft, there's another MMO they're currently working on known as Project LLL. This one is coming to PC and it's a first-person shooter MMORPG. It looks like Destiny meets Titanfall. We've got a decent amount of gameplay footage for this game and it's a beautiful UE5 game. The game will feature PvE and PvP encounters, as well as dynamic events throughout the world. The game looks like it's got a really dark and gritty sci-fi side to it, which definitely has piqued my interest. It was also announced that the game has a vast open world in which more than 30 square kilometers of land area are seamlessly connected to a single environment. The core elements that make up the open world are uninterrupted loading and movement. In order to convey a seamless environment, they implemented content streaming and utilized the most cutting-edge rendering technology. So it sounds like they're really wanting to have a more open world feel as opposed to its primary competitor, Destiny, which has more of a lobby-based MMO feel to it. To put that into perspective, 30 square kilometers is about the same size as Breath of the Wild and GTA 5. Based on the gameplay we saw, there appears to be a lot of sci-fi and horror elements, grotesque enemies, a mega boss of some sort that appears to be made of 1,000 arms. I didn't see any quote-unquote magic like you'd see in a traditional MMO. More so, we saw the character utilize rockets fired over his shoulder from a backpack gadget, a jetpack for jumping to higher places, and even some kind of shield to protect him from incoming enemy fire. By far, the most common weapon used in the gameplay was a rifle, which was used to take down 90% of enemies in the video. So it looks like it's definitely a shooter, first and foremost. Given that this is an MMO, I do wonder if or how many classes it might have. Will they have abilities? Is it entirely gear-based? Will we have passives? There's so much that we still need to learn. All in all, it looks like a pretty cool world. It's got a very dark and gritty feel to it. The gunplay looks like it feels solid, and it looks like it's very much in a playable state, which means this one is likely to release sooner than most of the MMOs on this list. Next up, we have SOULFRAME from Digital Extremes, the same people that made Warframe. This one's coming to PC and console. It looks like this is going to be an MMO light. In other words, it's going to be an MMO in the way that Warframe is an MMO. Perhaps more co-op than massively multiplayer, but we'll have to wait and see how it turns out for sure. Fortunately, this one is developing very fast, and they've been able to show off a good bit of content. The plan is for it to be a fantasy, magic-heavy MMORPG, much more of your typical melee and magic type of universe than Warframe's sci-fi gun-heavy universe. The fighting that they've showed so far has had old-school Dark Souls vibes to it, kind of eerie, mysterious, and beautiful all at the same time. It sounds like you will change packs in SOULFRAME in the same way that you change frames in Warframe. Doing so will change your skills. The world and the dungeons we've seen so far have looked fantastic, and I really can't wait to see more. It's worth noting that I haven't seen anything in the way of the Trinity, that is a tank, a healer, or a DPS. If this ends up being a game where everyone is a DPS, I think SOULFRAME is definitely going to scratch your Warframe itch a lot more than it scratches your classic MMO itch, like WoW or Final Fantasy would. As of right now, they have given no indication of what the monetization model will be, other than that it will be free to play. If it's like Warframe, it will be pay to advance faster and pay for cosmetics. Warframe is a game that has a lot of polish and some incredibly outlandish ideas that really paid off. They were never afraid to try things I'd never seen in other games before. Of all the games on this list, this is easily one of the most likely to succeed and thrive. The team working on it, their familiarity with the engine, and the quality of what we've seen so far, I'm expecting big things from this one. On top of that, it should be releasing soon compared to the rest of the MMOs on this list. It's already doing closed playtests with a hope to open those up to more players very soon. Next up, we have Dune Awakening from Funcom. This one's coming to PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. Back in 2019, Funcom announced they were working on a Dune MMO, and now we finally know everything about it, including an approximate release date. Dune Awakening is expected to release in the first quarter of 2025. The director of the game describes it as a survival, open-world, massively multiplayer game. Players are invited to explore the world of Dune and involve themselves with politics, intrigue, and finding a way to survive together on the most dangerous planet in the universe. I would describe it as Funcom's Conan Exiles meets Rust meets an MMO that takes place in the distant future in the Dune universe. It sounds epic. The director says that when Dune Awakening begins, you're a castaway in the deep desert, and all you'll have is a knife you crafted from scrap metal. You'll have to use this and only this to sneak into enemy camps and eliminate enemies to better arm yourself. By endgame, you'll be part of a big guild that has a fleet of vehicles, such as ornithopters, sand bikes, and tanks, that you'll use to head out to collect spice in the desert, where you'll undoubtedly clash with your enemy guilds. And where there's noise in the desert, there are sandworms. While playing Dune, you'll have to learn how to survive the sandworms and to manage your precious and incredibly limited water supplies. Dune Awakening combines the grittiness and the creativity of survival games with the social interactivity of large-scale persistent multiplayer games to create a unique and ambitious open-world survival MMO. As mentioned, this is the developer that made Conan Exiles, which is described as an online multiplayer survival game with mounts and mounted combat, set in the lands of Conan the Barbarian. And no surprise, there seems to be a lot of overlap between the two games. It sounds like Dune is going to be a way more ambitious version of Conan Exiles. Instead of dozens of players on a server, Dune will have thousands. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in a game where you're meant to gather materials and build a base to defend yourself from other players in the wilderness. Right now, I'm totally picturing a guild-centric Rust, but in the desert with a giant sandworm roaming around trying to kill me. The best materials and ingredients I'm assuming will be deeper into the desert, farther from the safety of your fort. So perhaps you'll spend a lot of time upgrading your still suit and your vehicles to venture farther out into the dangerous deserts without dying. Of course, one of the primary resources will be spice, which you'll spend much of your time seeking out. But remember, as mentioned earlier, the sandworm won't be your only threat. Much like Rust and Conan Exiles, players will also be seeking out these valuable resources and will likely try to kill you to take yours. If you manage to succeed in your hunt for spice, you'll be able to consume it to conquer your senses and acquire powerful abilities. We still don't know what these abilities will be, but this is something I'm very curious about. Fittingly, if you consume too much spice, you'll become addicted to it, but I don't know what the consequences of that are yet. Beyond that, you'll be able to hone your crafting for financial gain, as well as construct a fortress in the style of your choosing. I think the most interesting thing about describing it as a fortress is that this makes it sound like a structure that is going to be quite substantial in both size and scope. Dune Awakening looks like it's going to be a real solid entry for players looking for a PvP-centric MMO. So far, it sounds like PvE players' mileage may vary with this one, but we'll have to wait and see what kind of PvE the game has and if it will be enough to keep a PvE player engaged. Next up, we have Throne and Liberty. This is an MMO developed by the South Korean studio NCSoft. Throne and Liberty is a AAA MMORPG set to be released on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. Throne and Liberty was released in the East in 2023 and released here in the West September 25th. NCSoft recently partnered with Amazon Game Studios to have them publish the game here in the West, but don't expect Amazon Game Studios to release a different version of the game for the West. NCSoft has said loud and clear that this will be the same game that people are playing in the East. They have no intention to drastically change the game or its monetization model for the West, which means yes, it will definitely be pay to win. Throne and Liberty was initially built to have auto-pathing, autoplay, offline play, and pretty much every bad idea you could implement into a single MMO. This seems likely the result of the fact that early on there were plans for this to be playable on mobile, but that has been scrapped for now. As of right now, Throne and Liberty will be a PC and console MMO. Autoplay and offline play have fortunately been removed. This is a PvP MMO first and foremost, and therefore is quite light on PvE content. Throne and Liberty is the spiritual successor to Lineage 2. In fact, Throne and Liberty was originally going to be the next Lineage game, but in writing the story for the game, NCSoft realized it would be best served as an entirely new IP. The game will feature non-instance dungeons that you can head into and explore alongside other groups of players. I absolutely love the amount of mobility it looks like they have integrated into Throne and Liberty between the grapple hook, the gliding, the transformations, so getting around the world should be fun. The game plays different between day and night, as well as when it's rainy or sunny. Throne and Liberty will also feature siege battles. Now, the siege battles will be a significant part of the game, much like they were in Lineage 2, and they will be the primary endgame activity. Even siege battles will be impacted by the rain. For instance, certain passages into castles will not be available if it's rained recently, as they'll be flooded. Winning a battle for a castle will net your guild a very hefty sum of money, so players are definitely going to be eager to do so. NCSoft has the ability to make great MMOs, but they also often find themselves succumbing to that sweet temptress named over-monetization. That same temptress that has given NCSoft a bad reputation in the West over the years. Next up, we have Ashes of Creation, coming to PC. If you love the idea of Throne and Liberty, but you hate the idea of pay to win, Ashes of Creation might be the perfect MMO for you. Ashes of Creation started its development in 2016, so it's currently 8 years in and no release date in sight. It's worth noting though, there is a controversial closed alpha coming up here at the end of October that I'll be jumping into to finally get some hands-on time with the game. If you don't want to fork out $100 and some odd required for the alpha access, then be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you can see my videos about it when they go live. Ashes of Creation is definitely one of the most exciting MMOs on the horizon. It's a massive MMO featuring a beautiful, seamless world, and is set to release on PC with no current plans for console and definitely not coming to mobile. While no official release date has been announced, we still know way more about this game than any other MMO on this list. Unlike many of the other games on this list, Ashes of Creation has already had a very public, very successful Alpha 1 back in 2021, where players were allowed to stream and make content about the state of the game so far. On top of that, the developers have been very public with their progress every step of the way. This year, they showed off a lot more gameplay around their caravan system, and more recently, a raid fight with a dragon. So this MMO does have a decent chance of turning out to be a real, complete MMO that releases into full 1.0 state someday. My favorite part about Ashes of Creation is that it defines loot boxes, XP potions, and inventory problems as pay to win. In my opinion, that is a massive breath of fresh air. It looks like the monetization of Ashes of Creation will be 100% above board. This is just one more reason I think it stands a fantastic chance of succeeding where others have failed. The game will be sub to play with no box purchase. Combine that with its beautiful world, traditional MMO design, and ambitious scope, and you can instantly see why Ashes of Creation is currently one of the most anticipated MMOs today. It will feature the trinity of tank, healer, and DPS. Combat can be a make or break feature for this genre, but after seeing some of the combat, I think it looks pretty decent so far, and I'm excited to see what they come up with for the rest of the classes. Ashes of Creation is not content to build a better version of what came before it. It also has some innovative features, including things like plans to have a dynamic world that changes based on player behavior. Specific nodes can be upgraded to unlock new content and new resources based on player activity in that area, which means that every server could look completely different from every other server. Which nodes have metropolises and which nodes have wildernesses will be decided by the players. If the community spends enough time in an area, they might uncover a dragon or a raid that was previously not available. I hope they somehow hide some of the mystery from the player base during the alphas and the betas so that we don't all know exactly which nodes to level up when the game is finally released. As of right now, Ashes is a long way into its development, but I'd guess it's at least 3 years from being complete. It's worth noting that it really does feel like Intrepid has ramped up their progress this year with one incredible live stream after another. It's definitely one of the more unique and interesting MMOs to follow on this list. The only downside is that it's a PvP MMO, so PvPers are going to absolutely love it, but PvE players might be disappointed with the Ashes of Creation experience. Next up, Riot's League of Legends MMO, coming to PC, and, well, we're not sure yet. We don't know a lot about this one, but there was one development that was made publicly, and that was the departure of their lead, Greg Street, who left Riot and started his own studio so that he could make his own MMO. Does that mean his vision of what a great MMO would be and Riot's vision were not aligned? I guess time will tell when we eventually see the two products unfold. It's exciting to think that any of the MMOs on the list could be the next one to capture the genre the way that WoW did in its prime, but I think Riot's track record so far suggests it's definitely one of the most likely candidates to succeed. One interesting thing of note is that while Riot and Fantastic Pixel Castle are both studios located in the United States, they're both owned or financed by Chinese gaming giants Tencent and NetEase. Will we see Chinese monetization models leak into these MMOs? So far, they say no. One thing is for sure, Riot's MMO will launch to a massive audience, as its fans have long been waiting for a reason to dive into the League of Legends universe. Everything we know about the League of Legends MMO in the past is a moot point now, as they announced that they were scrapping all of their previous years of work with the departure of Greg Street to start over and try to make something that felt more unique. That news hit me like a punch to the gut. With Blizzard's Odyssey being canceled and Riot's MMO being restarted, the MMOs we were most excited about keep getting pulled out of our reach. Next up, we have Ghost by Fantastic Pixel Castle. This one's coming to PC first and then console later. The developers of Ghost feel like MMOs have moved too far in the direction of a solo experience, and they aim to bring it back to a more community-oriented experience. While they haven't put out very much art for the game yet, they've described it as being a fantasy game that will not have elves and orcs, so they want to try to do something new there. In Ghost, the game will be broken into what they're describing as shards. There's going to be blue shards for you and your friends. These are basically going to be private instances where you can get together and do everything from killing monsters to building bases. Then there are red shards that deliver a traditional MMO experience. They say you'll never see the same blue shard twice, which means they plan to use some amount of procedural generation to make sure they are always a little different than the last time you entered. They say they want this game to be for everyone, including endgame raiders, PvPers, and questers. Interestingly, they want a brand new player to be able to jump in and play with someone else regardless of how long they've been playing the game, which brings a ton of questions about progression into my mind. Does this mean that the world is going to be level scaled, or how is that going to work? Generally, I am very much against level scaling, especially in MMOs. It never makes for a compelling combat experience. Mobs just don't scale well that way. They never have, and I don't think they ever will. So this topic really concerns me. They also say that there's going to be between 20 and 50 classes in game. Some of these classes will be unlocked by playing the game, but it sounds like the depth of those classes would be kind of like saying Classic WoW has 27 classes because each class has 3 specs. Ghost will have some form of account-wide progression to make it so that you can more easily try and play all of those classes, or at least as many as you'd like to. They also want to make it so that your achievement grinds and your rep grinds are account-wide. Fantastic Pixel Castle has also said that the game will feature the holy trinity of tank, healer, and DPS. They think this works great and does not need to be reinvented. I fully agree with them on this. Anytime an MMO lacks the trinity of tank, healer, and DPS, the group content always really fails to captivate me. That teamwork and the strategy that comes with the trinity is generally what separates MMO combat from other types of games. Right now, they are thinking of having more skills on your bar than League of Legends and less than in WoW, so somewhere between 5 and 50 skills on your bar. That doesn't limit it a whole lot yet, does it? FPC does not want to go the free-to-play route with microtransactions, and I'm fully on board with this. I think that if you want to compete with WoW, Final Fantasy XIV, or RuneScape, you're going to have to monetize like them. Not because the subscription model is perfect, but because free-to-play erodes and undermines the reward structure and progression systems that are so essential to a successful MMO. The 3 largest MMOs right now are sub-to-play for a reason. It just works for the genre. Another interesting note was that Fantastic Pixel was considering not having an auction house in-game. I'm definitely someone that prefers to collect my own gear and to collect my own ingredients as opposed to buying it on the auction house, but there's definitely a case to be made for having an auction house economy. There's a lot of players that really enjoy that type of stuff, so it would be really interesting to see them try to forgo that in this game. I've played games in the past like Lineage 2 where you actually had to sit there and set up a shop because they didn't have an auction house, or you had to yell in zone chat, and both of those seem like a real step backwards compared to what we have now, so I'm really interested to see where they go with this. Ghost is looking to have a hybrid tab target / action combat system, so it's going to sit somewhere in the middle, so we'll have to see what that means. I love a lot about this game, but it's also got some parts that I'm worried about. The shard system has it sounding a lot more like a lobby-based multiplayer game than an MMO, which might also be fun in its own way, but might not provide the traditional MMO experience that a lot of players are looking for in this game. Now, perhaps the most important bit of information. When will this game be released? Ghostcrawler said that MMOs typically take 5 to 10 years, but he's hoping that Fantastic Pixel Castle gets to make Ghost in 4 to 6 years, which means they are probably still about 3 to 5 years out from releasing this game. And by the way, guys, if you're enjoying this video, be sure to like and subscribe to be kept up to date on all the latest MMO news. Next, we have one of the most interesting MMOs on this list, and that's going to be ZOS's new MMO. If it's anything like their previous MMO, it's going to come to PC and console. ZeniMax Online Studios are the developers of Elder Scrolls Online, and they're working on what appears to be an MMO. I feel like I've been reporting on this one for half of my life, and we still don't have a lot of information as it's been kept really close to the vest by ZOS. Here's what we know so far. Ben Jones was hired in 2018 to be the creative director of a still unannounced project at ZeniMax Online Studios. Ben previously worked on titles like Battlefield 4, but perhaps most interestingly is he left Battlefield 4 to start Fugitive Games, where they leveraged a successful Kickstarter to build Into the Stars. Into the Stars was apparently one of the first games to ship using Unreal Engine 4. After finishing that game, he went on to work on a zombie survival game before beginning what he calls the most exciting and unique opportunity of his career at ZeniMax Online. The lead level designer, Colin Campbell, worked on games like Mass Effect Andromeda, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and Jedi Fallen Order. So perhaps we can use a little bit of his past work experience to decipher what they're working on now. We also know that ZeniMax has put out posts asking for people with experience building all types of MMO systems. They're describing their game that they're building as massive, and it will utilize what they've learned from creating ESO. They also say that it's a new IP, so it's not going to be ESO or ESO 2 by the sounds of it. And they also said that they're making and using their own in-house engine, so it's not going to be another UE5 MMO. On their hiring page, they had a position for a vehicle specialist, so it seems like the game will take place in an era where vehicles of some sort do exist, which lines up with my comments about the art director who previously specialized in futuristic space games. There were also rumors a while back that ZOS was working on some kind of Star Wars project, but those were whispers in the wind, and we've had no way to verify that they had any sort of legitimacy. What we do know is that ZeniMax Online Studios, the maker of Elder Scrolls Online, has been working on a new unannounced project since at least 2018, and it was confirmed in 2019 by Matt Furr. That's about it. They recently reiterated that they've got over 200 people working on the game spread all over the world, with a team of 50 working directly under the game director, Ben Jones. They have described it as grand and massive and benefiting from their experience making ESO, and the game will have vehicles. They've hired people with experience with space-themed things, and rumor mills are suggesting something space-related. They're now 7 years into development, so we can expect some kind of announcement in the not-too-distant future, unless they're running into some trouble with the development, which wouldn't be surprising given that's what's happened to every other major studio that's working on an MMO right now. I'm curious how these games will do when they hit the market. Where will they rank among the existing MMOs? And if you want to see the current MMOs ranked by their player base size, click the video popping up in the top right corner of the screen right now, or in the description below. What do you think? Which upcoming MMO do you think has the best chance to do something great? Which one do you think has the best chance to fail? Let me know. Massive shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting the channel so that I can bring you guys the best quality content possible. If you want to become a YouTube member for channel badges, access to a private Discord channel, and behind the scenes footage and more, click the join button below. If you're not sure what to do next, consider watching one of my other MMORPG videos popping up on screen right now. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you in the next one.